The warm desert wind swirled over the plains of Moab, carrying with them the whispers of a generation's journey. On the horizon, the promised land stretched out, lush and inviting, a stark contrast to the barren wilderness that had defined the lives of the Israelites for 40 years. They stood gathered, a multitude of men, women, and children, their faces etched with hope, fear, and anticipation. Before them, their leader Moses stood tall, his aged frame imbued with a quiet strength. This was no ordinary gathering. It was a pivotal moment in their history. Moses looked out over the people he had shepherded for decades. His heart swelled with love and sorrow. This was the end of his journey. He would not cross the Jordan River with them. But his task was not yet finished. He had one final mission, to prepare them for what lay ahead. "Listen, O Israel," Moses began, his voice carrying over the crowd like the desert wind. "Today, I remind you of the covenant we have with the Lord our God. It is a covenant of life and blessing, but it demands your obedience and faithfulness." As Moses spoke, he wove a narrative of remembrance. He recounted the night of their deliverance from Egypt, when the cries of the firstborn echoed through Pharaoh's land, and the blood of the lamb marked their doorposts as a sign of God's protection. He spoke of the Red Sea parting before them, their triumphant escape, and the bitter waters of Marah turning sweet by God's hand. But his tone grew somber as he reminded them of their failures, the golden calf they had worshipped at Mount Sinai, the grumbling in the wilderness, and the spies whose fear had condemned an entire generation to wander. "Even in your unfaithfulness," Moses said, his voice steady, "God has been faithful. He has fed you with manna from heaven, guided you with a cloud by day and fire by night, and ensured your sandals did not wear out." Moses paused, letting the weight of his word settle over the people. Then, with renewed vigor, he began to outline the law that would govern their lives in the Promised Land. He spoke of justice, mercy, and compassion. He instructed them to care for the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. He warned them against idolatry, urging them to destroy the altars of false gods and remain wholly devoted to the Lord. "Obey these commands," Moses said, "and you will prosper in the land. Your fields will yield an abundance, your enemies will flee before you, and your children will flourish. But if you turn away, if you disobey, you will face curses, drought, defeat, and exile. The choice is yours, life and blessing, or death and curses." Moses' voice softened as he spoke of hope. He foresaw a time when they might stray, when their disobedience might lead to exile. "Even then," he said, "if you return to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, He will restore you. He will gather you from the ends of the earth and bring you back to this land." The sun dipped lower in the sky as Moses turned to Joshua, his loyal servant and successor. Placing his hands on Joshua's shoulders, he said, "Be strong and courageous. The Lord will go before you. Lead these people well, for they are God's chosen." He then wrote down the law and commanded the priests to read it to the assembly every 7 years so that future generations would never forget their covenant with God. His final words were a song, a poetic declaration of God's greatness and Israel's calling to be a holy nation. With his work complete, Moses climbed Mount Nebo, his steps slow but resolute. From its summit, he gazed upon the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land he would not enter. Tears filled his eyes, not of regret but of fulfillment. He had done all he could. On that mountaintop, Moses died, and the Lord himself buried him in an unmarked grave. His legacy lived on, etched in the hearts of the people he had led. The Israelites mourned him for 30 days, and then, with Joshua at the helm, they crossed the Jordan to claim their inheritance. The story of Deuteronomy did not end with Moses or even with the Israelites entering the Promised Land. It became a cornerstone of faith, a reminder of God's faithfulness and the responsibility of his people. The covenant Moses spoke of echoes through the ages, challenging every generation to choose life by loving and obeying God. For those who hear the story today, the message is clear: life is a journey of faith, marked by choices that shape our destiny. The covenant invites us to trust in God's promises, to walk in His ways, and to find hope even when we falter. As Moses said so long ago, choose life, that you and your descendants may live. The journey of Deuteronomy continues, calling each of us to step into the promises of God with courage and obedience.